South Asia is kind of like Latin America. They don't really give you much trouble. There's not a whole lot you can do about them. Obviously, you need to save the rainforests at the start. That's doesn't even need saying, I think. And apart from that, they're just gonna grow on their own. One thing that should be noted is that their population, like Latin America, actually does tend to very slowly grow. So you may want to play one-child policy at some point and reduce that a bit. I played that near the end when it went over 1 billion, but you can play it earlier. It doesn't really matter. Let's see, Japan. I'm actually gonna talk about Japan and Australia, or Oceania, I can never pronounce it, together, because these share a lot in common. What you need to keep in mind about these two regions is that they are incredibly sensitive to any kind of financial trouble. So, especially Oceania. Japan is a bit more resilient. Australia is terrible at this. So if for example at the start you just write out ban coal, Australia basically dies. And what that means is, I actually mentioned this earlier, but I'm just gonna say it again anyway. Well, they basically their unemployment skyrockets. Like, it can go up to like 90%, and there is nothing you can do to budget out of there. You can play job sharing initiative, you can grow whichever sector, it won't do anything. And this I don't think this is a bug, actually. I think it's just that well, Australia really is just very sensitive to these kind of shortages, because it's a very small population, which means that things you kind of perceive as small to them are very large because they are small. It's kind of like, I don't know, to a human a piece of grass is tiny, but like to a bug it's enormous. It's kind of like that. Not to imply that Australians are bugs in any way, but yeah, I'm just gonna move on. Yes. So yeah, what you want to do is be very careful about them, as I actually did at the start of the game. I played cards to decline coal power and later to decline oil power, which actually helped tremendously to make sure they don't crash when I ban stuff. Now, quite frankly, Australia isn't that valuable. It doesn't have a lot of people, it doesn't have a lot of GDP. You can use it for research, and I did. As you saw, I researched infotech in this region, but that's pretty much the only thing it's good for. Otherwise, if it crashes, you probably won't even notice. The only problem is, well, they are kind of peaceful, so they probably won't start nuking the planet if you just leave them alone. But they do get technology very quickly, so you can bet on it that they will have 4th generation nuclear, which means that if you really piss them off and their HDI really falls low, which is actually kind of hard to do, but if you manage that somehow, they might just start a global thermonuclear war, which would be kind of funny if Australia actually did that. I've never actually seen that, although they have become like very unstable or something in some of my games when I did nothing to them. So yeah, take care about that. Japan is similar. Japan is basically the same thing, only they're kind of a bit less sensitive, and they do have a stronger economy, so they are actually worth saving, just for purely economic reasons. You should notice that Japan, I didn't bother to manually save Japan, which is kind of why when I banned oil, well, they seem to have gone just fine with coal, but when I banned oil, their HDI did drop, their GDP dropped too, sharply, and it actually took them like 100 years to recover. Yeah, so yeah, that was all the regions separately. Some global thoughts, I don't know, I pretty much explained them, if everything while playing through. Global HDI ended up at 0.86. I think that's pretty good. As you can see, it fell sharply when I banned coal. When I banned oil later on, it fell a little bit, but not that much. And after that, it basically just increased constantly. GDP pretty much did the same. There was one sharp drop here, a somewhat smaller drop here, and then it just kept going up. Let's see, emissions. Yeah, there was a huge drop here and somewhat smaller drop around here, and after that it kept getting smaller and smaller. And this big orange blob at the bottom, that's the Middle East. As you can see, their emissions kinda didn't really change throughout the whole game, except, well, until the very end. Let's see, total production. I'm only producing a little gas, which, as I explained earlier, is needed both as gas itself, and it can be drawn into oil, which is, you know, used to run cars and make aluminum and stuff. Well, if you check this, as you can see, conventional gas is being produced, because it is increasing very, very slowly. But, well, beyond this point, it's such a small increase that you don't really need to bother about it. Actually, I think I stopped the expand gas production cards around, well, not here, it can't have been here. I think it was around here somewhere. Although, honestly, I think I could have stopped it earlier, because I wasn't actually actively checking. But what those cards do is increase this. They increase the orange area, which of course allows you to further increase the red area, and it makes peak production higher, which means you can keep extracting at a high rate for a longer time, which is very, very useful when you're mostly using gas to power your entire planet. Later on, as you switch around into renewables from the satellites, you probably won't really need gas at all beyond that very small amount. Banning stuff like tight gas and clatrates is a very good idea, partly because you get support for it, which is always good. But mainly because this stuff actually does give you a few random events, like gas drilling contaminates water table, that kind of stuff. You probably saw that in the news a few times while I was playing. You probably see it in your own games too. And basically banning unconventional gases stops any of those from happening. Same is true for unconventional oil, which stops tar and shale drilling, which does kind of the same. What should be noted is that banning unconventional stuff just bans their production. Banning the conventional stuff actually bans their use as energy too. So when I banned conventional oil, that actually banned all oil power, but I only banned tar and shale oil later, because at the start I still wanted to use that for like fuel and other miscellaneous purposes, which actually don't require that much oil, but well, it's still a good idea to keep up production, because at that point I was still using a lot of gas, which meant if I had to draw oil from gas, that might have created an even bigger shortage, and I wanted to avoid that. I didn't actually use fission in my game at all, as you might have noticed. Well, I didn't expand it manually. That was because the commit to renewables card takes a lot of time to switch over to fast breeders or 4th generation nuclear, which basically means that I could have either used 3rd generation nuclear in like 1 or 2 regions and would have eventually ran out of uranium because there isn't a lot of it, or I could have waited a lot of time and switched over to 4th generation. I decided switching to gas is easier because yes, uranium doesn't really directly emit anything, but well, it's just too troublesome, and you can't really rely on uranium too much because there isn't a lot of it. So maybe you can play it in 1 or 2 regions and go for 3rd generation, or you can upgrade to 4th generation, but it costs a lot of money, which you don't really have at the start, and later on you have gas power anyway, so it doesn't really work for me. Let's see, I did play cap and trade near the end. You saw that it did, well, it should have reduced emissions. I think it did. Yeah, as you can see, I started playing it here and it did reduce emissions quite a bit, especially in the industry. The rest stayed most the same. Russia's emissions fell too. So playing cap and trade does reduce your emissions by quite a bit, and since near the end of the game you do have a lot of money to spare and you don't really have anything to spend it on, it's always a good idea to play cap and trade, if only for the other 2 cards, the ones that cost $10. Cap and trade, well, if you use my strategy, cap and trade isn't gonna do its normal thing, like it's not gonna help developing regions grow because there aren't gonna be enough rich regions. But you can still play the other cards and then just stop cap and trade in developing areas when those are done. For those wondering, if you play the cap and trade card, the other cards are appear the next turn. Now you might be thinking, if you're not going to actually use the cap and trade card, then you just play the 2 others and then cancel cap and trade. Yeah, that doesn't work. The next turn the other 2 cards disappear. So don't try that because it wastes your turns.